Notebooks use Markdown for its textual content. And Markdown is a lightweight markup language that can be used to create instructional information. There's many flavors of it, and the particular flavor of Markdown that Jupyter uses is GitHub flavored Markdown, and here's a link to its webpage. And this comes with a syntax for making multiple heading levels, itemized or enumerated lists, tables, quotes, hyperlinks, images, and more. Some of the really useful ones, particularly in kind of a programming class, are verbatim and code blocks, and where there's recognized syntax such as Python, Bash, Markdown, HTML, etc. Markdown also allows you to embed HTML directly into it and LaTeX into it, and I'll give some illustrations of this below. In addition to the various Markdown, GitHub flavored Markdown documentation, I have a link here to a cheat sheet for the GitHub flavored Markdown. So here's just a few examples of how I've used Markdown in various texts that notebooks that I've used. So one of the things we did in our summer school was teach the students how to write Markdown. And this had two purposes. One, so that they could edit the notebooks that we were providing them, provide their own notes or expansions of what we had written in them. Also, we needed them to learn how to use the VI editor, and so this gave us an opportunity to have them use a terminal editor as part of the class. And so here's a rendering. This is what Markdown looks like. And this code right here, this Markdown code right here, is then rendered as this. So the image is rendered. We have headings, we have hyperlinks, and we have a mail to link here with the email. What this actually looks like is within my Markdown cell, I'm making a verbatim block of code and telling it this is Markdown code, and so it'll do the appropriate syntax highlighting. And then we're actually just rendering it. The notebook is rendering the Markdown. As you can see here, our logo is very large, and so one of the things we had them work on is that you can embed HTML into the Markdown. And so here, telling them to replace this straight Markdown, which doesn't have any ability to control for the image size, replacing that with HTML, where we can specify the size of the image. And with this change in the underlying code, our rendering now has a much smaller icon that we were able to control the size for. Here's another example where I'm embedding HTML, and this is where they are working on a problem where they're reading in tabular data, and then they are creating new columns of data where they're taking accounts of population sizes and converting that to probabilities and then cumulative probabilities. And I'm simply taking an output from my solution, which renders an HTML table, pasting that table into the notebook so that they have a sense of what their final solution should look like in detail. The third example here is just showing how you can embed LaTeX into the document. And I haven't had any serious limitations in what kind of LaTeX I can write. I haven't been able to get numbered equations, but almost everything else, any kind of LaTeX insertions I've have rendered beautifully. So here's an example where we are starting to look at, this example comes from kind of an introduction to time series and calculus, and we're looking at various models of blood serum drug concentration. So we have our simple one, and then we have a more sophisticated drug clearance model, which takes into account absorption of the drugs from the digestive system and then clearance of the drug through various mechanisms. And so when you think about what you can write in the document, not many limitations of what you can do with the Jupyter notebooks. Here's another example where I'm using the code blocks. Here showing it that this is a Python code block, and it's rendering the syntax. So it's recognizing the keywords within Python, string literals, etc. And so I am providing this as a template for their solution, that then they would copy and paste this and make the appropriate edits here with these triple question marks in a code block. So that's just a brief overview of the different kinds of things you can do with Markdown. I think essentially any kind of content you would create with PowerPoint or Word could be easily replicated in these Jupyter notebooks with Markdown.